because I love talking to friends about how they made their millions and helping business owners solve their problems. It's fulfilling. I love sharing all the secrets. But when I can't meet in person, there's only one tool I use. It's called Riverside. Riverside ensures I can talk to someone anywhere in the world, recorded in 4K, so the quality of the video matches the quality of the humans you're listening to. Riverside records separate audio and video tracks so we can easily cut out those awkward interruptions that are my least favorite part of interviews. They have in-platform editing software based off a 99% accurate AI transcription. And if that's not simple enough, they take AI one step further for their show notes. It summarizes your entire content into an SEO-optimized description, and chapters all automatic, saves me a ton of money. So you can use Riverside for podcast interviews, panel discussions, presentations, webinars, more. And best of all, it's simple. Try Riverside for yourself with link in the description. Use code CODY for an exclusive discount. I get a deal, you get a deal.
First of all, I'm so excited to have you here, Chris.
Thank you.
I was in the Uber right before this with my Uber driver, Dan. Shout out, Dan, wherever you are. And I told him that I was interviewing you. And he said, "Oh, is that Chris Voss, like the negotiator?" And I said, "Yes, that is." And he asked me a question that I thought was really good that I thought I'd pass on to you. He said he's going through a tough divorce right now. And he said he thinks that she's a narcissist. So his question was, how do you negotiate with a narcissist?
Understand that their most important thing is them. You know, the perspective is negotiating with any type that's different than you is hard, but not unexpected. Like, you know their patterns. Like, you know what she's going to say if she's a narcissist or if she's not. You know what she's going to say based on what she has said, what people say and do. It's all patterns. Like, there's nothing that's really that surprising. So just look at the patterns. You can predict, and then based on those patterns, like one of the stupid patterns, when we taught people to ask questions where the answer is no. So people are conditioned that if they say yes, they're letting themselves in for something that they don't want. There's a hidden trap. So even if it's something they should say yes to, they won't do it, or they do it painfully because they've been conditioned. They've been trapped by yes. Like every now and then I'll ask somebody a question where the answer is yes, and it's clearly in their favor to say yes, but they've annoyed me, and I'm just torturing them because I want to see how hard it is to say, yeah, they like choke on it. So the same thing is people are conditioned to say no. It's a pattern. You feel safe and protected when you say no. So we're talking to people and they say, yeah, it's hard as hell to deal with them. They say no to everything. They're in no mode. And my answer is, change your question. So the answer is no. Nah, that won't work. It'll work because it's their pattern. So take a look at her patterns and communicate with her based on her patterns, because the patterns aren't going to change. Now, you can change how you approach, and you'll get a different outcome.
That's so true. I heard a line once, which was, do you want to be right or do you want to win?
Right, exactly.
And I think a lot of times people want to be right.
Want to be right.
Or they want the other person to think that they are right, which is real hard.
Yeah, which never happens. But you feel self-righteous.
Right. Yeah, because one of the other questions that somebody asked me to ask was, what do you do when you are debating reality with another? How do you handle that? Like in a relationship, I'm like, no, well, the thing that happened yesterday is you did this and you were rude, and then you did this and I didn't like this. And they're like, that's how it happened. This is what happened. How do you negotiate two different perceived realities?
Well, summarize how they see things until they say that's right. Because there's the underlying assumption of that is that your perception of reality is accurate. So while it may be accurate, it's always incomplete. There's no such thing as perfect information. That means you don't have all the facts, regardless, depending upon the point of view, depending upon what led up to it. So you stimulate the other person's thinking and your own to try to articulate, all right, so here's how you see this went down. Here's how you saw the day. And here's how you can even say, here's your view of reality on this. Which, by stating it like that, you've never actually agreed. And you can never be pushed into, oh, so you agree. I said, no. Here's your view of this. You're trying to get it right. Now, even articulating their point of view is a good thinking exercise for you. I heard a guy once say, empathy is a species of reason. And I thought, ooh, yeah. There's actual analysis and reasoning involved in the exercise of empathy. So It gives you reasoning. It also gives them reasoning to hear it out loud. Like if you're arguing over reality, there's something in their head that makes sense to them. When I was on a crisis hotline, one of the greatest things we did was just be a sounding board. Like it makes sense to you while it's in your head. But as soon as you say it out loud, and I repeat it back to you, if it's distorted often, as soon as it's out in front of you, you're like, oh, now that we've said it out loud, that no longer makes sense. So there's a joint reasoning involved. So I would say if you're arguing reality, see if you can summarize what the other person sees as reality. It'll level both of you out, and you probably get to a resolution much more quickly.
That's a great point. Why do you think a lot of us don't do that? So that seems very reasonable to me. But then I might be in a negotiation with my partner or a negotiation with my husband, and for some reason I just keep repeating my points. Do you find that to be common?
You're an assertive.
Yeah.
And when people don't understand you, all you got to do is say the same thing louder.
It sounds silly when you say it out loud, but you just did the argument back to me and it worked.
Well, I'm an assertive too. I know that's an aspect of being an assertive. We don't feel heard. We want to say it again more loudly. Now, why don't we do it any other ways? Because we don't see any examples of it. You don't. All the examples on TV and the movies are bad. But on the movies and TV, we see a clip from some TV show and you see bad communication, and they get a different outcome than reality often gives you. And so, well, it worked on Suits. Why it must work in reality. And then when it doesn't work, you're like, I must not have said it the way they say it on Suits or Billions or any one of those shows.
So I'll say it louder.
Yeah, or it just the perception of what's really going to happen is always distorted in movies and TV. So where else do we get examples? Lawyers. Lawyers, the self-styled negotiators of planet Earth. Well, they see everything as making an argument. Got to make an argument, make a great argument. That was that line from that Tom Cruise movie a long time ago, A Few Good Men. Make a great argument. So why doesn't that work in real life? Well, I don't know that it works that well in the courtroom anyway. But the other difference, when a lawyer's making a case to a jury, the jury's sitting there passively. It's not an interaction. Most people will keep quiet until they hear something they disagree with, and then they jump up and say, no, this is where I disagree. That's not a communication with a jury. So it's an artificial representation of life. I'm talking to a lawyer just a couple nights ago. He's incredibly successful with juries, like phenomenally successful. Doesn't have the same level in interpersonal relationships. He's okay. And he can't imagine, look at how I do with juries. I win unwinnable cases because of my ability to appeal to juries. So if you ask him how to communicate with somebody, he's going to tell you, well, you're going to tell the story, you got to do this, you got to do that. And I'm sitting there listening to him the other night, and I'm like, all right, so here's another example of something that doesn't apply to day-to-day. But you talk to this guy at a cocktail party, and he's spinning these great stories, and you're like, yeah, making an argument. But it doesn't apply to our interactions. And I think that's why we don't take the time to show people they've been heard. Because we have no idea how massively effective it is. And then if you're being coached and trained by, me and my coaches, we start giving you examples of game-changing moments. And a lot of people are like, oh, if I'd have known that was a key, the reason you didn't know, because by and large, you don't see it.
Yeah. How much of getting what you want is really just listening to another person first?
A massive amount of it is. Every type, there are three types, conflict types, negotiation types. We believe strongly. Fight, flight, make friends. Assertive, analyst, accommodator. Getting what you want is secondary for each type, not primary. What the assertive really wants is respect and to know they've been heard. If you treat an assertive with respect and you show them that they've been heard, they're going to come significantly in your direction on the deal, if not all the way. But they will always come much closer to what you want. So let's say you make 50% of the deals with an assertive on the spot once they feel heard. Cool, you got 50% less work. And they're more inclined to agree with you. Analysts, often referred to as the flight type, because conflict is just one outcome. They see conflict as highly inefficient, and it's an inefficient choice. And there are many other choices, so they just avoid conflict. There are also some people refer to them as avoiders. I think that's an inaccurate. I think they're more analytical. What do they want? Information. Like they're desperate for data and information. So they're not necessarily looking for the deal. They're looking for information first. Accommodators, what do they want? Relationship-oriented, hope-oriented, positivity-oriented. What they really want is for us to have a great interaction. You can hear accommodators negotiating or in a meeting, and they'll get together for an hour, not get anything done. But they had a great time. And afterwards, they'll say, it was a great meeting. You know, I'm sitting back listening to a meeting of accommodators earlier today. I'm like, what the hell are these people talking? They're not getting a thing done. I don't hear any next steps. I don't hear any accomplishment.
Oh, I'd have a hernia.
Yeah, exactly. And like afterwards, it was a great meeting. Well, they didn't get what they wanted in the deal, but they had a great interaction. So as soon as you realize what the other person wants first, then it's often easier to get the deal on the heels of that.
Brilliant. How do you determine what you are? Do you have like a quiz on your website?
Yeah, we do, actually.
That's brilliant.
We
okay, so where do
test
people
people
go?
on it. BlackSwanLTD.com, BLACK, BLACKSWANLTD.com.
Okay. And on it, you can search for the type of...
Yeah, 3 types.
Are you or you are?
Yeah, or conflict, your conflict type.
Your conflict
Your default conflict mode. We believe strongly that the world splits evenly into thirds. Huh. Doesn't matter gender, ethnicity, geography, religion. Some groups will lean a little more in one particular direction. Like when we first started pulling data, my son and I, Brandon, and other people in my company, we were pulling at Georgetown, a business school, after we'd been testing people at Harvard. And American business schools are an international audience. Like it's not all Americans, and it ain't all white males. White males, you know, the quote white male category is usually actually in a minority if you take a look at the entire group. Get it? In Georgetown, we got a lot of people from India. At USC, we got a lot of people from Asia, making a distinction as much as we try to lump those two groups together today. And, you know, one group might be heavy assertives. Another group might be heavy on analysts. But by and large, it would break evenly into thirds. So what difference does it make? The difference it makes is that impasse. The misunderstandings are often most generated by a type mismatch. What's an example? Analysts love to think they love silence. And in silence with you, they will start to bond with you. Shared silence is a bonding experience because you're being quiet because you obviously like to think and you respect that they like to think. Now, accommodator, relationship-oriented. The silent treatment is the meanest thing they could do. It signals fury to go silent. So you get an analyst and an accommodator talking to each other, and the analyst is going like, oh, my God, will they ever shut up? And the accommodator's going like, I got to keep talking. He's silent. He must be furious. Wow. It's hysterical.
I employ some of these. I employ all of these, actually.
Right.
Wow.
Well, I love analysts because an analyst, you need somebody who's analytical.
Yeah.
You know, it's easier, as a general rule, it's easier to get an analyst to learn assertion and being more pleasant because they're constantly analyzing what's going on. A lot of analysts will masquerade as accommodators because they'll see the accommodators by being pleasant and smiling all the time. get more deals. And they don't understand why they're not getting more deals. And then they see this outcome and they analyze it and they're like, oh, maybe if I smile more. So I tend, even though I'm an assertive, I tend to lean in the direction of analysts.
Interesting. I did see a study the other day. It was done somewhere in the UK. We can link it in the show notes. But the study basically said, and it was fascinating, that over time, over like a 20-year progression of a career, if you had to choose between higher IQ or higher likability score in order to have higher compensation,
right,
you would want to choose higher likability over higher IQ and even higher perceived competence. That even if you were more competent, as opposed to being more likable, you would make less money over time. Have you found that to be true?
I hadn't looked at it specifically like that, but I believe 1,000% that to be the case. I heard a stat being thrown out by Stuart Diamond a long time ago. Stuart Diamond, Wharton negotiation and business professor, wrote a book called Getting More. And Stuart Diamond's book is like the textbook on negotiation from an analyst's point of view. He's super analytical, loves data. And when you're aware of that, you read his book, like, oh, this is how an analyst sees things. Anyway, I'm listening to him at a talk one time, and he says, you're 6 times more likely to make a deal with somebody you like. So he's my source for that piece of data, which backs up what you say. You're more likely to make a deal with somebody you like. You get along with people you like. You'll get promoted based on likability. You'll be seen as a team player based on likability. Like there's so many things that are necessary for success in business, which spring from being likable, which is distinguished from needing to be liked. Now, an accommodator has a definite need to be liked. And that's where they'll occasionally run into problems because if the assertive or the shark or the cutthroat on the other end of the conversation realizes, oh, to get what I want out of you, all I got to do is act like I'm mad at you, and you're going to start giving in because you have this desperate need to be liked, that's what makes them very vulnerable in that regard. So there's a huge distinction between being likable. You can completely control that. You can't control whether or not you're liked.
So it's probably really important that you understand not only what you are, but also what other people are that are around you too. I mean, everything operates first from first principles thinking. If I don't, know thyself, Oracle at Delphi. If I don't know who I am, how can I operate on the world? And so I mean, I don't even know. Can you tell if somebody is an assertive, an analyst, or what's the third one again?
Accommodator. Can
you tell right away?
Well, nobody acts like an assertive other than assertive.
Really?
I'm going to be direct and honest. I was once told by an FBI hostage negotiator colleague, when I was being me, said dealing with you is like getting hit in the face with a brick.
I feel like I have a tendency like that.
Right. You're direct and honest. Right. Poster child, not making any judgments politically one way or another. Donald Trump, poster child for the assertive. And I can remember his daughter Ivanka said, people think he's overly blunt. He's just direct and honest. That's a description of the assertive. Time is money. Let's get this done. If we make mistakes, we'll fix it. We'll find out, and then we'll fix it afterwards. The other two types don't look like assertives. Analysts tend to come off as super low-key, sometimes cold and distant. Neither the assertive nor the accommodator will ever give you that. Now, what gets people confused is when the two types see the success numbers of the accommodator, then they'll run in disguise as accommodators occasionally.
Chameleon.
Yeah. We'll just have picked that up. Like an early director of marketing in my company was dead-on analyst, assassin, an absolute assassin, and figured out that just talking and laughing got her deals. So everybody that knew her thought she was an accommodator because she was smart enough to figure out what a difference it made. So that's occasionally where people get surprised. They've learned to be accommodating over their base nature. And then to continue, each type has their basic trait is essential and inadequate. It's essential to be assertive in negotiations because otherwise you're making the other side guess what you want. But it's inadequate unless you find a way to say it nicely. It's essential to be analytical. And it's inadequate unless you come out with what you want and are nice about it. It's essential to be nice. You're never going to make a great deal unless you tell people what you want and you put some thinking into it. Yeah. So each type has a characteristic that's both essential and inadequate by itself.
A lot of times in negotiations and in even just communication between humans, which seems to me like constant negotiation.
Right.
Sometimes it's hard to reflect back even what you're doing in the moment.
Yeah.
And you seem to have really high self-awareness of your intonation, the word choice that you use, who else you're, talking to at any given point. How does one become more aware, not just of the other, which I think is what everybody obsesses with? Right. Oh, well, what are they? Are they a narcissist? Are they a whatever? Right. It's like, well, what am I and what am I doing in this moment? How do you build self-awareness of how you show up in the world?
Everything is learned, so it's nothing other than practice. Yeah. And you try to get it a little at a time. People want to make these great leaps in ability as opposed to getting a little bit better a little at a time. I'm a big fan of James Clear and Atomic Habits. Like his masterclass, going to start having the people in my company watch the masterclass. And he says, just get a little bit better each day. James Clear will say, get 1% better. Derek Gaunt on my team says, get 1 degree better. What I love about Derek's analogy is, in terms of water, 1 degree better, not noticeable, then suddenly there's a breakthrough. Whether it's, from ice to liquid or liquid to steam. And that tends to be what happens. You get a little bit better incrementally, and then suddenly there's a big breakthrough. And that leap that you were looking for that you wanted to make today happened. But you built it up a little at a time. So what do you got to do? You just try to get a little bit better each day. Practice. I think the biggest thing that we do is, unlike athletes, we don't practice in our heads. If there's an interaction we could have done better, what if we go over in our head again, we envision ourselves making a really cutting remark. This is what I wish I would have said.
Yeah. I always picture like Ari from Entourage. Remember that show?
Yeah.
I only had those one-liners.
Yeah. The real life Ari Emanuel, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But we can go back in your head and you can re-edit the film. Like, all right, yeah, so it's going to be human nature to imagine yourself making a cutting remark or yelling at them or screaming at them, telling them they're idiots. Well, you can go back and rehearse it in your head doing it right, which is what all great championship athletes do. They get the mental rehearsal. I remember once heard it referred to as visioning. Imagine yourself doing it right. It increases the chances that you actually will. It's a rehearsal in your head. So you had an argument with somebody, go back and take a deep breath first. Imagine taking in a deep breath. Like if I give myself 3 seconds of space, then that's enough time to gather myself up. I get triggered. If I don't give myself that 3 seconds and I start going down a rabbit hole, I lose control too.
Can you trigger yourself in other ways to be better? For instance, I was watching a show the other day, and they were talking about how there was a story of a little boy. And the little boy was given all of the clothes of a young prince. So he was a little pauper boy, a little poor boy, and then he was given all the clothes of a young prince. And because he was given the clothes of a young prince, people treated him like a young prince. And because they treated him this way, he started to sort of believe that he was, from both the clothes and other people's perceptions. And at some point, he started acting like a young prince and sort of changed his whole perspective just from the way that he dressed. And this was obviously a simplification. But a lot of times I think there's a portion of it that's visioning. And then are there other triggers we can do? Like if you want to be more professional and trigger professional Chris Voss, are you like, I'm going to wear this suit? Or do you find that it's less external and more internal prep that you have to have?
I think your clothing is a great reinforcing mechanism. And so that's an aspect of stepping into the role. Yeah. It's not the fake it till you make it short hand thinking. I don't think that's it exactly, because that defines inauthenticity. You're inauthentic, and you got to be authentic. But yeah, you can put on nicer clothes. You can work yourself into it a little at a time, and then if you're paying attention to the feedback, you're seeing a difference in the way that people respond to you, and then it becomes a virtuous circle, as they say, instead of a downward spiral. So I think 1,000% I agree with that. Take the small steps to take yourself in that direction.
You've talked quite a few times about the fact that we do not see this behavior mimicked. And I always go back to that line of, it's hard to be what you cannot see.
Yeah,
And,
very well
and so
said.
you have a documentary that came out, Tactical Empathy, which displays some of this. So let's talk a little bit about that. It's newly out on Amazon. Like, what do you hope that people get from this that adds to the 2 million people who have already read your book, Never Split the Difference?
First of all, there's some great hostage negotiation stories. It was put together by Nick Nanton and DNA Films. Nick's got 22 Emmys.
Slacker.
Yeah, exactly. Nick is a great guy. So we picked out some of the stories that were significant in my career. Chase Manhattan Bank. They're not all roses. Like, if you're a hostage negotiator, stuff's going to go bad if you do it long enough, just based on the numbers. Hostage negotiators have roughly 93, 94% success rate, which means once you start getting into double figures, just based on numbers, things are going to go sideways. And how do you survive that? How do you get through it? And there's one in there that went sideways, went bad. And there's others that spectacularly turned out wonderfully in just really unpredictable ways. Human stories. And so then we talk about that a little bit, and it's exciting, it's entertaining. And the progression of my career, and then a little bit of how we started to translate that into business negotiation. And then we got a sneak attack in there.
Ooh.
And the sneak attack is, a friend of mine, Stephen Kotler, said, empathy is a sneak attack on racism.
Ooh.
And so if you look down on empathy, increases reasoning, it improves your decision making. So how much of things that looked racist was just a result of bad decision making? Well, whatever that percentage is, let's get it out of the way so we can find out what's really racist.
Yeah.
So it was a deal that I got a kick out of cutting. We're working on the documentary. I want to back into police minority community relations. Empathy works on all levels of human interaction, whether it's a business deal, your significant other, colleague, or with the cops. So I get approached by NYPD. Come in, we got a special cadre. We want to make a difference. And we got this group of select guys we want to give special training. And the sergeant that approached me says, I've looked at all your videos, and I think your stuff is perfect for us. Now, we're heavily in the business world at this point in time. And he's got a limited budget, nowhere near what we normally pay. So I go, we'll do the deal based on two things. Number one, you let us film it, put it in the documentary. Number two, my son's going to teach it. Now, my son's mom is African-American, so the world sees him as African-American. Big dude, played college football as a lineman, not a small guy. When he feels like it, looks very menacing. A buddy has told him a long time ago, in black neighborhoods, black people get out of his way.
I like that.
And he's a genius at this. He's a star. He started absorbing it when he was a kid. So, I want my son to teach it because there's some optics here. You get another white male teaching how to talk to black people. Let's have a black guy stand up there and talk about how to use empathy. So then he says, okay, to get permission I got to pass it up the chain of command, One Police Plaza. Now, One Police Plaza is as bad a bureaucracy as anybody has. And I know that somewhere up the line, somebody's going to shoot this down. So I call a friend of mine, John Miller. At the time, he's a deputy police commissioner. John and I have known each other for a long time. And as it turned out, about 4 months earlier, John had called and asked a favor of me to be at a conference. John's kind of got blank check. A number of people in my life have blank check. You ask, I'm there. If unless I have an obligation, because I don't back out of obligations, you ask, I'm there, no charge.
With the shovel?
with whatever they need.
Okay, I like it.
And he'd called me, said, I want you to come speak at this conference. I'm like, I'm in. You got it. Not knowing that I was going to, or needing to ever call in a favor. So I called John on the phone. I go, like, here's the deal. Here's what I want. And I figure that if you talk to the deputy chief that's in charge of this area, that they'll do it because they trust you and they know that you're not going to make a recommendation for somebody who's not going to be a good ambassador. Yep. I'm a good ambassador. I'm never going to embarrass John. And he says to me, well, as it turns out, I'm the deputy chief in charge.
That worked out.
And consider it approved. Wow. And so we cut it and we put it in there, and it's good, compelling stuff. And we've got some of our business negotiation training, we believe, like the SEALs do. The more that you sweat on the training field, the less you bleed on the battlefield. So we're going to put you in our training through a tough negotiation. I mean, we got a negotiation where your heart rate will jump to 160 in about 2 seconds because we'll put the psychological responses. We want to let you know what the psychological responses are. You can be sitting still and your heart rate will go through the roof based on your perceived pressure. And if we can teach you how to deal with that, you're not going to run into anything tougher than that in your day-to-day life. You got it. You're ready. You come out of there going like, I'll take on a terrorist negotiation right now. I'll talk to that bank robber, or I'll talk to my boss, or my coworker, or my teenager. Yeah. I got this. So Brandon does that in the dock to these cops. And they're all very well-intentioned and come up with responses that need to be made better. And I'm really impressed with, after he gets done verbally punching these guys in the nose, then he sits down with them and he shows how compassionate he is towards them. And it's powerful stuff. I'm really proud of the way the thing turned out.
I think one of the most interesting things about watching these moments is in most of our life, we won't have a sit down with a terrorist or a bank robber that we have to change that could alter the outcome of our life in some significant way. But our life is a compilation of tiny moments of negotiation.
Yeah.
And if you can see it competed at the highest level, one, you can be what you can see. And then two, you can also say, wow, that trick worked there. And you can get past your limited beliefs that are like, well, Chris said this would work, but it actually won't. And it's like, motherfucker, this is going to work on your 4-year-old because it worked on a police chief in a do or die situation. Yeah. So like, what's your excuse? So I think documentaries like this are really powerful for people to watch because you get out of your own way when you see that it works, even in the hardest of times. So I think that's cool. I highly recommend Tactical Empathy. I want to talk about a couple of your quotes that I found really powerful. And this is probably more true now than ever, but you have one that says, yes, we are wired to be negative. Here's what you can do about it. What can we do to change the fact that we are maybe these negative little monkeys running around?
Well, think of it like, I think of mental hygiene like oral hygiene. Like, look, I brushed my teeth yesterday. You mean I got to do it again today? And I got to do it twice? Like, I did it yesterday. I got to do it this morning and tonight? And everybody assumes that you have to do that because our default biological mechanisms make it daily attention. Not a big deal. Not half an hour, not 45 minutes. 2 to 6 minutes, depending upon, and then you're good. So our default mechanism, same thing. Little things throughout the day. Cliche stuff. Whether it's meditation, whether it's a breathing exercise, whether it's a short gratitude exercise first thing in the morning, 2 or 3 minutes, mental hygiene. And then you start to set the tone through the day, and you give yourself little moments throughout the day. And then whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be 3 things you're grateful for. Yeah. Start the day. Forcing a smile on your face. Mm-hmm. There's neurochemical reactions hardwired when you smile. It's a tiny thing. In and of itself, it doesn't make you super happy. But the tiny little things throughout the course of the day. I can remember one time, for a while, the advice was find 3 things new each day that you like. Yeah. And now you're looking for the positive in life, and and you remembered it because you took your focus out of the negativity in the headlines, and you're looking around. And at the end of the day, you reflect back on those three things.
That's beautiful.
Now, inside a week, you're going to find yourself with a completely different attitude towards life. It won't change how you feel tomorrow, but the long term comes at us really fast, and you start to make these kinds of changes, and then you got a habit. Habits have momentum. So you got a mental hygiene habit, and pretty soon you're smarter. You're 31% smarter in a positive frame of mind. People find you more likable, so more people give you stuff. And all the friction that we assume is part of day-to-day life, as soon as you shift out of survival mode and into success mode, then life starts accelerating. And you look back, you don't have to look back a year. You look back a month, and you start seeing a big difference in your life.
So true. I started playing this silly little game when I was traveling at the airport because I get annoyed at the airport a lot. I'm assertive, so it's not efficient enough. There's a delay. What's happening? Why doesn't this person know how to do that? All the things. And I realized that I was really judging people all the time. So people would walk around and be like, that guy's walking slow. That one's doing X. And I finally stopped allowing myself, and every time I saw somebody, I would say, I just want to find one thing that I think is cool about that person, aesthetically.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
And that was it. And I really kind of quickly realized that now I do it naturally. So I was like, oh, that's a cool ring. Like, what is that going on that Chris has there? And so with every person I see, I kind of have immediately this nice thing about them. And it's really hard to think somebody's a piece of shit when you find one part of them nice. And so that helped me as one of those little exercises.
I love that. That's brilliant. And then and on top of that, and here's another reason why I love the momentum of that. I definitely think there's something to karma and actual energy. I'm convinced there is, for a variety of reasons. The science isn't there yet. That doesn't mean it ain't there. So if you're putting out positive energy, then it's another self-reinforcing behavior. Other person senses it, they give it back. It starts to come back. Karma, it just works. And you enjoy life more, and you're more successful.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest issues I have with kids these days on TikTok who label themselves negatively. Like I saw a video the other day, we could play it, and the video is a young woman that labels herself your unemployed friend, and about how for 8 months she's been looking for a job. She's been unemployed this whole time. And the funny part of the video to me, well, that wasn't funny. I found that tragic because she is labeling herself the thing that she no longer wants to be.
Right.
And then the second part that I found slightly humorous is she was saying, well, now I give up on work in general because a friend told me that she didn't get a job because of her energy. And she was like, how ridiculous is that? Somebody didn't get a job because of their energy? And I thought, oh, wow. If you haven't run a business or you haven't run a team before, maybe you've never felt, although I still think they would have, that person who kind of nobody wants to be around.
Right.
They could be the best performer on your team.
Right.
But their energy is soul-sucking.
Right.
This isn't crystal woo-woo nonsense. It's like literally I walk into a room and you're just like, God, that hit me in the face.
Yeah.
It is real, even if the science can't prove it yet.
I agree 1,000% completely. And you can't ignore it. So you're either paying a penalty for it or you're using it to make your life better.
Yeah, you're right. What do you think about, we're kind of talking about this idea of the things that you let into your psyche affect how you view the world.
Right.
And these days, we have a lot of negative political commentary happening in the world, especially right now. Are there ways you protect your psyche so that you can more assert what you want on the world as opposed to be taken for a ride by what impacts you?
Yeah, and it's all exercises, it's all practice. Like my Instagram feed. Mm-hmm. Like I'm sitting here looking at these stupid panda videos because it cracks me up when pandas are falling all over the place.
This is good. Now I know what to buy you next.
So, my echo chamber is designed to be positive.
So you tap out of negative things that are on your feed because you don't want to see them.
Yeah, exactly.
Love that.
I'm managing. I'm managing my echo chamber. I'm cautious about what news feeds I'm paying attention to, and I'll opt out of them if they're nothing but negative. Yeah. Or I'll try to jump out of them more quickly. I know I was thinking on the way over here, Warren Buffett, he scans the headlines, period. He doesn't read the articles. But, he's known for scanning the headlines of several papers. So, how do you keep yourself informed without going down a rabbit hole if somebody's wrong? Negativity, bringing it back. Media's never been accurate. And so to say that, the quote, the lamestream media, if you will, well, they were never not that way. We're just a little more aware of it now. Right. So I'm like, all right, so Buffett's reading, but he's reading the headlines from multiple sources. So he's not getting bogged down, but he's staying informed without running down a rabbit hole of somebody's trying to make him feel a certain way. So I'm controlling my echo chamber to some degree. And then there's constant reinforcement. This is happening for me, not to me. Something bad happens. A stupid one, and it works. Jocko Willink, his reaction to everything, no matter how bad, how catastrophic, is he says, good. We lost our budget. Good. That gives us the opportunity to work harder on this area. And it's in his master class. It's in his book. And he's got some guy on his team saying, everything something goes wrong, you always say good. And so every now and then I'll try it. Like, all right, so this didn't work. Good. And it's there's a mental reset. I mean, you got to constantly be fighting off to survival mode. And so what are the little things that work for you? And I'm on the lift on the way over here. Dude misses the turn. And I'm sitting there, I want to say, look, man, it's right in front of you. How did you not miss that? And instead of getting upset, and then I'm going to give off a bad vibe, and then he's going to feel bad. I go, good. And there's something about that helps a reset. So I'm constantly working on a reset to keep the karma levels good and to not be the person that sucks energy out of the room.
I love that. I want to steal that good idea. I think I never totally related to Stoicism and Ryan Holiday's stuff because I do enjoy, I like positive emotion. I like being excited about things and happy and joyous and elated. And sometimes I think actually there's a ton of art to be found in the full spectrum of the human experience, even in the real sad moments, as long as you don't let them pervade everything in your life.
Yes.
And so Stoicism never totally resonated with me because of that reason. But I like this idea of being able to say good and then a rational thought. So you can be joyous and still have rational thought to it. I think that's really useful. Remember, guys, the only way this podcast gets shared is if you're not greedy and you share the podcast with the needy. So make sure that you share this podcast wherever you listen to it. Tag me on social media at Codie Sanchez. It gets me all tingly inside. My heart just swells. This little black, tiny heart inside my chest swells when I see you guys tagging me in the podcast. So thank you for doing it. I look at every single story that you guys post on Instagram. I look at every single comment you do on YouTube, even some of you who are dicks. And I read every single review. And so thank you guys for doing it. It's the only way this podcast grows, and it's because of all of you. And I appreciate each and every one of you. You guys are a big deal to me. Okay, I wanted to ask you about like a couple things that were more tactical. So let's say there's a new term, maybe not that new, but I hadn't really heard about it, like getting ghosted. You've heard of that, like people stop responding to you.
Yeah.
And so somebody was asking on one of the channels, what would your advice be to someone who's getting ghosted by like a romantic partner or maybe even a business partner? What do you do if you're getting ghosted?
All right, so there's two things to keep in mind. The system you're employing is perfectly designed to give you the outcome that you've obtained. So if you're being ghosted, I could give you an immediate reset. But if you go back to how you got there, you just wasted your time. So nobody ghosts you if talking with you does them any good. Otherwise, they'd still be talking with you. So there's only two possibilities why talking to you doesn't do them any good. And it's usually a combination of both. you're not listening, or at least they feel you're not listening, because all you're doing is giving advice, making your case, presenting your value proposition. That's going to be a contributory factor. The other thing is they no longer have the ability to influence the outcome on their end. So why talk to you? Those are the only two reasons why talking with you won't do them any good. If talking to you did them any good, they wouldn't be ghosting you. So the one sentence reset. Have you given up on X? And name it. You're looking for a no, and you send it exactly as that. You don't add to it. You don't subtract it. To the accommodators, that feels horrifyingly blunt. And what'll happen, my girlfriend Wendy's an accommodator. She's brilliant songwriter, a model, musician, entrepreneur, accommodator. She's having trouble getting somebody getting back to her, and what should I do? And I said, well, have you sent? And I sent the have. Yes, I did, and they didn't get back to me. And I'm like, all right, let me see. Because anytime somebody says they didn't get back to me, they put a whole bunch of stuff into it. And so instead of the one-line text, have you given up on, and the name of the project, it's like, hey, Bob, how are you today? Hope you're good. Have you given up on the project? Because I haven't, and when you get a chance, get back to me. Love, Wendy. I'm like, all right. Well, technically, you sent the text. You put in a whole bunch of other stuff. Got to take that out. Well, that, to the accommodator, that's so harsh. It's so harsh. I'm like, just send it as is. She sends it. She gets a response back right away. Wow. Because that's what happens. Like, of all the things that we teach, have you given up on? Now, it has to be something that they've already started. Because it is so effective that every now and then I'll get a first-time email from somebody that says, have you given up on hiring my company to do your marketing? Yeah. And I'm like, oh, you're a manipulative guy. You've learned how ridiculously effective this is, and you're using it as an opening, and you're getting great responses. But for me, the context is, since I never started, I couldn't have given up, and I don't respond to those guys.
Yeah, same.
But when you're being ghosted, you're going to get a response within 3 to 5 minutes of them seeing it. So when you send it, you ought to be staying by your device in case they see it right away, because it's coming screaming back at you. Now, the first part, your system caused it. You can't go back to how you got there in the first place, because you've opened them up. Now they're open. What you got to do when you restart is summarize their perspective, because that makes people feel heard. If you go back to the pitch, successful businesswoman I knew here in LA a number of years ago, she's pitching a guy on an investment. Can't get him to get back. It's before my book's coming out. I said, send this one-line text. And she's like, fine, nothing else will work. Might as well. Sends a text. He responds immediately. She immediately goes back into the original pitch. She never hears from him again. So you can't go back to what got you into that in the first place.
That's good. What about in other high-stakes situations? Like, what do you recommend people do in an environment like today where we have unemployment at sort of new record lows? People are looking for jobs. It's a little harder in the economy out there. What should people do in a job interview? Is there one question that you think people should ask every time?
There's two, if you will. My first favorite one is, how can I be guaranteed to be involved in projects that are critical to the strategic future of the organization? Like, there's so much in that. That's awesome. And I originally got that from a guy I went to high school with, who's the head of an international bank now, my good friend Tom McCabe. Now, the important thing about, we went to high school in a small town in Iowa. Neither one of us have any family connections. We went to unremarkable universities, so we're not on the back of alumni associations. I didn't go to Harvard Business School where I got all these contacts that were classmates of mine that are out ruling the world. And Tom is ridiculously successful, genuine, authentic, deep down assertive, very charming dude. But that question he taught me because that immediately tells your employer you're a team player. You're not grabbing on your own behalf. And not only you're a team player, you want to play in a championship. So even if you don't get into the championship, they know you want to be there, and they notice you, and they keep an eye on you. I'm doing a training call, sales call for this big sales organization, and all the salespeople are there, and the CEO is there. And they do a Q&A, and in front of the CEO, they say, how do I get more out of this guy? How do I get paid more in this job?
Ooh.
And I know everybody's like holding their breath, seeing what I'm going to say and how he's going to react. And so I lay that question out to all of them, and he immediately says, I wish everybody here would ask me that question. Because he wants team players that want to move the needle in the most dramatic fashion. He wants courageousness, team players that want to raise their salary by providing ridiculous amounts of value to the corporation. Yeah. And then the upside to that is they identify you as somebody who's truly ambitious, who wants to work hard. And if they don't give you a raise based on your production, which you will talk about, now you've built this great resume of accomplishment where you're marketable in an insane way. You did this, you did that. On my last job, I moved the needle for the entire company. That makes you eminently employable. So that's question one. Question two, what does it take to be successful here? Which is not what are you looking for in a candidate. Yeah. Those are vastly different things. And I once heard somebody say, business school, they told me to say, always ask, what are you looking for in a candidate? That's not the question I gave you. There are people that are interviewing you. They're only interviewing you because they are successful there. And the quietest person is who you want to get talking. The quietest person that's either on the interview panel or that you interview with, they got a lot to say. They're not wasting it on anybody that doesn't listen. They're the quietest because they don't particularly want to be on the panel, but their boss put them there because of their demonstrated success, and they understand the ins and outs of the company. That's why they're on the panel. And they're not going to waste their time talking to anybody that's not going to listen. One of my students at Georgetown said in a panel that she was in, a guy leaned forward and said, no one ever asked us that. And she found out from the other members on the panel that this guy never spoke. And he laid out to her exactly what it took. Now, what you've just done with that question is recruited an unofficial mentor. Because they're going to watch to see if you do what they told you to do, to see if you take instruction. First critical issue, do you know how to do what you're told? Secondly, they now have an unofficial vested interest in your success. And what do you want from a mentor? Someone who will clear the way for you, somebody who will watch your back, somebody to keep negativity away from you that you don't even see coming. You're following their advice, they're going to watch out for you. That's how I got on the hostage negotiation team in New York. And about a year after I got on the team, I did an error in judgment on some teaching material that I used. And it had been given to me by the team leader. And she had used it multiple times and never gotten a complaint. And I used it, I immediately get a complaint for good reason. It was I shouldn't have used it. The minute I used it, I realized it was bad, it was off. Complaint comes in, and she immediately goes in to the administrative board that's investigating a complaint and says, I've been using this for years and I've never gotten a complaint. I didn't ask her to do that. Everybody could have stood back and said, we don't know where he got that. But here was somebody whose advice I followed that then looked out for me and had my back when I needed it. And that's really what you want from mentors. So find out what it takes to be successful and then actually do it if you get the job.
It's so true. I used to respond to every single DM or email that I would get for people saying, hey, can I get your help on XYZ, or I want your advice, or I want 5 minutes, or I want a coffee. And at a certain point, it was too many. And so I started saying, sure, read this book first.
Right.
I would give them a question or two, think about this, and then come back to me. And, of course, how many actually read the book and came back to me? Maybe 5 over like a year and a half long term.
Wow.
But basically nobody. And it made me realize that most people know what they want, but they are not willing to do what it takes to get it. And and so I quickly realized, this is a perfect way to screen humans.
Yeah.
Because there are many who want and few who do. And so I think people severely underestimate how rare competency, follow through, and doing the things you say you're going to do are. They're so rare. And so today everybody talks about there's so much competition, it's really hard to get ahead. Maybe you're just not doing what it takes, and the bar is actually lower than you think.
Agree completely. I think the bar is lower than people realize. They can't imagine that the mundane things are the competitive advantage, and they are.
Yeah, you're
Which
right.
is huge.
It's so funny too. I was in my company the other day. I've gotten a little bit more hardcore as I've gotten older.
Nice.
So I have things like, I think voice notes are rude to the receiver and great for the sender for the most part.
Right.
Like, it's nice to send a voice note if you're excited and you're trying to convey emotion, or if you're, if there's something that verbally you have to talk about that that emotion is needed. But I find that voice notes are really inefficient. I'm assertive, so that makes sense, right? Now, if I was accommodative, I probably would love voice notes. But I don't. I really hate them. I think they're violence. And so I've started in my company to say, like, you can't send me a voice note. Nobody ever send me a voice note, please. And if you want to send me a loom, you can, because then I can 2x speed you and not be too mad about that.
Right.
And so then an accommodative person could send me what I find to be a totally unnecessary loom, but I won't be annoyed because I can 2x speed, or I can see the transcript quickly.
Right. Right.
So I think technology is really interesting for trying to negotiate even the way you communicate, which I never realized that half of winning in business is good communication. If you want to make more money, you need to learn to communicate better. And like, we have a member of one of our businesses where this person just cannot communicate clearly and concisely and ask for what they want,
Right.
and ask what it is willing to take to get there. And it made me realize why Jeff Bezos probably made everybody write a brief pre the call, and everybody read the brief, because I think most companies die on the altar of poor communication.
Right. And rambling thought.
And rambling thought, and ill-formed opinion.
Yeah.
But yet, who taught us that class? Nobody.
Right.
Is that
Yeah.
something that you talk to companies about at Black Swan? Do you talk do people understand that, or do you think that negotiation and communication are a lot more connected than maybe we
Just
realize?
darn near synonyms.
Yeah.
Because almost everything, why is almost everything a negotiation? You're negotiating for people's time. That's a commodity. Time is always a commodity involved. Even if it's a cash transaction, there's time is involved. Money's not always involved. And most people think they're only in a negotiation when you start talking about money. Well, you've been in a negotiation for a while. Performance is a negotiation, action, time. And so, yes, we talk about that all the time, and the different modes. And I think a little bit what you're talking about, people get addicted to just one mode. Like, I just want to send voice messages, or I just want to send texts. And you find, depending upon the nature of the message, you got to make it complimentary. So we normally focus on making people make things more concise. Concise is always preferred.
From all three types?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
Because everybody at the end of the day wants to be heard and values their own time.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, the danger with concise communications is they can be cold. So you got to take that into account. It'll at best it'll be cold if it's concise, and it may sound like shouting. So dress it up occasionally, not overboard.
Do you use emojis?
I use mostly punctuation in text. I don't think emojis are a bad idea. In concise emails, an email that's once you get north of 5 lines, you're bordering on it being too long. So if I'm delivering bad news, I'm going to say I got bad news. People want to be prepped. I'm going to write the bad news, then I'm going to finish positively with something that is true, which is usually how I would have started the email. You know, your gut instinct, hey, you know, I want us to work things out. I've always thought a lot of you. I have tremendous amount of respect. That should just, go ahead and write that. Just put it at the end. If you got bad news, I got bad news. And then I'll throw in, I'm sorry, I'm afraid, in front of the bad news. I haven't heard this in a while, but I remember hearing a few years ago, the problem with women is that they're always apologizing. So therefore, I'm sorry, you should never say that. Yeah. Not true.
Interesting.
I say I'm sorry all the time, in front of bad news, not after it. And it's a softener, it's a warning. Look, I'm sorry, I got bad news. I'm sorry, I'm afraid I can't do that. Versus, I can't do that, I'm sorry. There's something in the sequencing. If I say I'm sorry in front, you're like, ooh, what's coming? You're ready for bad news, you're prepped. Yeah. If I give you bad news and then say I'm sorry, then you're like, why didn't you warn me it was coming? So it's a sequencing issue. And most words, phrases, they're not bad in and of themselves. It's the timing, the context, and the sequence. I got no problem apologizing. Anybody that knows me, if they hear I'm sorry coming out of my mouth, bad news is on its way.
That's true.
It's how I'm assertive.
Interesting. So what about negotiation in the way that people typically think about it? We were talking about money. How do you negotiate for a salary and do it in the right way?
First of all, empathy is always about how does the other side see things. Empathy, tactical empathy, it's not sympathy, it's not compassion, it's not accurate, it's not the truth. If you can release yourself from all those things, it's not fair. How does the other side see things? So at the job, nobody ever goes to the boss unless they want something for themselves. So whether we like it or not, bosses, supervisors are conditioned to think of everybody as selfish. Because every time you come to me, all you want is something for yourself. That's the reality. You didn't cause it. You're not selfish. However, when was the last time you went to the boss and say, hey, is there more work I could do for free? I want to do more. I don't want to get compensated for it. I want to take more of a load off your shoulders. And I don't need anything extra for it at all. I just going to do it because I want you to feel good. Like, that doesn't happen. So what's the reality? You go to the boss because you want something. Realize that that's the case. So you can walk in and say, look, boss, I'm probably going to seem like another selfish employee that only comes to you when I want something. That's an empathy statement.
Oh, that's good.
That's not saying that you are, or that's true, fair, or it's accurate. You say, I'm probably going to seem like, because that's how you're going to seem. And they appreciate that. Empathy. Holy cow. You have an understanding of my perspective. Mm-hmm. Now I'm more open to what you have to say. So how does the other side see it? You can say it in a way, you can demonstrate understanding without agreement. Mm-hmm. This is the way it seems to you. I'm going to seem like a jerk. That doesn't say that you are. It's an awareness of the impact that you're going to have on the other side based on their context and their experience, which you may have played no part in at all. It's just a recognition of what the reality of what the other person is going through. And that then begins to pave the way and accelerate everything.
So smart. This is so random, but I've heard you talk about before. What do you call it? Do you call it your elevator voice? What is the voice you talk about when you're negotiating?
The late night FM DJ voice.
It's so good. First of all, I wanted to hear it live. It's as good in person as it is on the internet. Second of all, where did you hear that? How did you come up with that? Does it work? Do we all have one?
Everybody can use it. I think it started by accident when I volunteered last century. I started my career on a crisis hotline. And for whatever reason, I must have picked it up in a training because I'm coachable. Mm-hmm. Like if people have said, like, you know, are you a natural born negotiator? I'm like, I'm coachable. And that's it. I want to know what works. I don't care what works. Morally, if I don't like the morals behind it, I won't do it. Mm-hmm. But I still want to know what works. Yeah. I view it as my missionary and mercenary. Mercenary just wants to know what works. Missionary cares about where it falls on the morality scale. So first time on a hotline, I said, hello, this is Helpline. And then afterwards, the person supervising me like, man, your voice is great. That was great. And I remember thinking like, wow, I don't know what I did. But I got trained there that this calming, soothing voice really worked. And then I started getting involved in teaching there. And in the FBI, when you become a hostage negotiator, they want you to teach a lot. Because one of the best ways of getting good at something is having to explain how to do it to other people. So teaching is a great way to stay sharp. And at some point in time, I'm sure somebody probably told me, yeah, you sound like a late night FM DJ. And then one of the real kickers on it was a psychologist in one of the training classes I was teaching was a hypnotherapist. And he comes up to me afterwards, because I spent a lot of time on voice. He said, yeah, that's exactly what first thing we're taught when we're taught how to hypnotize people. So I'm finding practically, operationally, it works extremely well. And then now in our day and age of neuroscience, it shuts the brain down. And it simultaneously shuts down negative emotions. That's why emotions are contagious, because there are neurochemical responses to it. So calm is contagious. And I would have said previously it was calming, but in our high intensity negotiations, I'll come at you with the assertive voice. Yeah. And
what does that sound like?
The exercise is 60 seconds or she dies. And I'll look at you and I'll say, I need a car in 60 seconds or she dies.
That's intense, yeah.
And then it triggers fight or flight in you, and it interferes with your ability to think. And you will start repeating the same thing over and over again. And so then I'll switch to the late night FM DJ voice. I get the countdown going, and I beat you up through a countdown of about 35 to 40 seconds. I'll say that's left. And then at about 30 seconds, I'll say, provide a car in 30 seconds or she's dead. And I see person after person just go.
This is what I just did.
Right. Unable to speak at all. And that was when I realized, well, it's not calming them, it's shutting their brain down.
That's crazy.
And their negative emotions, their combative emotions are shut down. Everything is shut down. Huh. So we're running out of time after time, and we see them, I can shut your brain down with that voice, which is why you'll calm down. Yeah. And then the accommodator's voice, I'll shut your brain down, and I'll start counting down. And at about 20 seconds, I'll go, come on now, come on. You got to give me the car. You don't want this to happen. And they'll perk right up. Wow. Instantly, they will go from not being able to say a word, and their body language will change. They'll lean forward, and they'll smile back. Yeah. And they go, and they're suddenly instantaneously playful, triggering, which is why these are neurochemical reactions. These are not voluntary reactions. This is hard science. These are neurochemicals. I can pick your brain up or down based on the tone of my voice. Now, you can fight it, but you can't stop me from triggering the reaction. And so in knowing that, in all kinds of ways, like the playful voice. I love rolling into some place where there's some poor schmuck behind the counter that's just in a horrible mood. Yeah. And you can tell that their opinion of that everybody's bad. So they're going to be really negative towards you because it'll trigger you being bad, and then they'll prove their point. And usually if I'm playful with them, by my third response, they're playful and laughing too. And inside of 30 seconds, I've taken somebody who was just in a really bad place and made them happy. Yeah. And then it's astonishing what you can get people to do. Astonishing.
So true. The other day I was giving a speech, and I don't like the word Latinx, which they use for like Latinos. It's like this new word because O and A are gender, and I just
is that right? Okay.
I think it's fucking ridiculous, and I'm Latina, so I jokingly call it Latinx. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not a Latinx, you know. And so anyway, I was giving this speech to a bunch of Latinos. It was I was like, should I make this comment or not? I'm not sure. And I did, and I just said, listen, I think we have to be honest in this world today. There's like not enough honesty. And it's fucking ridiculous that you would call Latinos Latinx. That word doesn't even exist in our language. And it's because somebody at Berkeley came up with this crazy idea,
right.
you know, that this would be a good idea.
Some academic.
You're right, exactly. Who's probably like a middle-aged white woman like me. You know, it's like, take it easy, you know, like take it easy. So anyway, so I give this speech. I do that. I got some laughs. I was nervous. I was like, I might not get laughs at this. And a woman stands up, right, as a question at the end. And I could just tell. I was watching her face. I'm like, this isn't going to be good. She stands up and she's like, you know, I identify as Latinx. I'd like you to know. And I'm happy to explain to you why that is the proper use of the word. And then she proceeds to ask me like a reasonable question, right? And so I'm watching her and I respond back and say, first of all, brave, you bringing that up. Nice. Here. You know, I have crowd control. I'm on a stage. I have a mic. You know, you don't. So, hey, appreciate you bringing that up with a reasonably rational, like purview, not anything negative or gnarly. And, you know, and she was like, you know, serious. Yes. Kind of still has the face on. And I go, and you can call yourself whatever you'd like. I'm on board with that. Whatever you want. I just do not get other people to tell me what I'm going to call them. If I don't think that's reasonable, I'm not going to do that. So as long as we're cool on you do you, I do me, we're all good, everything's great. And she kind of nodded her head like, yeah, that's reasonable. And I was like, but also, Latinx is kind of funny, right? And she laughed.
Right,
and I could tell, you know, and so it was that same idea of how can you take, like, that little, it's the shoulder shrug, it's the little joke, it's the smile, and you can get far with it.
Yeah.
And she couldn't help but laugh. I'm not sure she actually thought it was funny. But in that moment, you know, we've like broken together this change. And I think it's the same thing with negotiating your salary. I don't know what you think of this one. You should tell me if you think this one's bad. But I always was in sales roles. And so, you know, back in the day when I was in finance and had bosses, I would need to negotiate my salary or negotiate a better split or something like that. I would always say two things. I'd say, well, I wouldn't be a very good salesperson if I didn't ask for the business, right? So like, you know, and I'd kind of shrug and go like this. And then later I would say something like, well, and you know, you can't blame a girl for asking, can you? And both times the boss would usually kind of go, bah, like, I get it. Right. But what I realized is those are both my perspective, not his perspective or her perspective. So what do you think about those two lines? Do those work, or is that too one-sided? Because I'm actually...
No, I don't think it's one-sided at all.
Okay.
I mean, playfulness is ridiculously powerful. And playfulness in a way where you're having fun with someone. And it's very similar to self-effacing humor. Like, these are all different aspects of empathy, because if you're laughing with someone, you're demonstrating an awareness of their perspective. And you're doing it as a playful, self-effacing way, in a way that's not threatening. Right. Derek on my team, Derek Gaunt, always says, your first move is to remove yourself as a threat. Then you're out of conflict because you're no longer a threat. So that whole approach is designed for you to be less threatening, if not to entirely remove yourself as a threat. And it is, in a way, sort of asking for empathy in a return, but it's asking for it as opposed to demanding it or being attacking and argumentative. I mean, there's so many levels that works that I don't see it as being self-centered at all. When you're making fun of someone at their expense, which is one of the things that I've had to sort of take out of my company a little bit, because, all us former cops, we used to bust each other's chops really bad. And, this locker room humor, which I now refer to as chimpanzee behavior, baboon behavior. I mean, I just don't like it at all. Yeah. And I saw the most insecure people trying to bring themselves up by putting somebody else down. So I can make fun of me. If you make fun of me, that's a whole different thing. And I discourage it across the board. And I actually sometimes test for it, because I'll make fun of myself. And if somebody really wants to run with it, then I know, all right, so if you're ignoring my feelings, you're ignoring the feelings of other people on the team as well. And I need to be extra diligent in that regard. I had an employee a number of years ago that he delighted when he was a hostage negotiator. A colleague of his had been on the phone when some bad stuff had happened, and he used to write him. He delighted and cackled about telling us about how much he rode that guy. And I didn't think that much about it. And then in our early days, and we were still, as we would say, busting each other's chops a lot, until I realized that he'd been writing another member of the team to the point where that this guy stopped using an example of illustration and a specific emotion that was very genuine to him. And I never saw it went away till that guy turned on me one day. And then as I was thinking about it, I thought, and I have stood back and watched you do that to other people on the team and never said a word. And now that I'm the target, now I'm angry. And so I thought, I got to be much more attentive to this deriding other people in supposedly a humorous manner, which is passive-aggressive. So that's a whole different aspect of me making fun of myself.
That's such a good point. That passive-aggressive nature is sort of a red flag indicator. I remember I got defrauded by this one guy who stole a bunch of money from us. And he was really charming, smart in many different aspects. We were friends. But I remember one little, when those little red flags go off in your head?
Right.
And a lot of times, at least, I haven't trained myself to listen to them. And so I ignored it. But I remember what the red flag was. It was little deriding comments towards me that weren't that bad. Because I got an ego. I'm okay. Right. I can handle some riffing.
Right.
But there were a few. And it was like, the influencer in the room or something. And I was like, because I don't really associate with that term. And a few different things. And I remember that moment thinking, I don't actually think he likes me. And that little derision is like, maybe he doesn't like me, or he wants to pull me down, or there's a little passive-aggressive there.
Right.
But I didn't internalize that. I thought, you're being sensitive, Cody, whatever, keep going.
Right.
And so are there little red flags like that you look for besides passive-aggressive? And have you found that passive-aggressive thing, do you want to watch out for people that are like that? Is that
yeah. I mean, I don't want them. I don't want them on the team.
Do you want to date them?
No,
yeah.
Absolutely not.
Do you want to be friends with them?
No.
Yeah.
Now, some people don't know any better.
Yeah, or they don't even know they're doing it. And so I will typically let somebody know. I don't want them to be in the dark, and plus I don't want them to ever say, well, you never told me. Right. And where it is now, I mean, I'll straighten it out really quickly. How would that look?
I'll tell them, and I'll tell them why. And yet sometimes you have a risk of being overly blunt. I'm aware of that. As an assertive, I'm often overly blunt. And so if I'm telling somebody something, actually what I've adopted just probably in the last year is, look, I got to mentor you right now. I'm mentoring you. I got to point out some stuff that's wrong. It's going to come off, that I think is wrong. It's probably going to come off as really harsh. And I want you to know you're being mentored right now. And I'm finding that also helps me soften things up, and it helps them see it in perspective. Like, I'm not going to correct anybody on my team unless I want them to get better and be more successful on their team. But correction doesn't always feel that way. And especially, I got some real youngsters working for me now. I'm leaning in the direction of younger people for a variety of reasons. And so that, I can come off as harsh. I got one guy on my team now, Nate, is a star. He's a star. He's going to do so much good for us. And he's just not used to, getting run over by a train. So I'll say, all right, look, I'm mentoring you. This is in the context of, I see a very bright future for you. We got to fix this.
That's a beautiful first sentence. I see a very bright future. We got to fix this.
Yeah.
Because you're basically saying, you got a huge runway, man.
Yeah.
I want to make sure you don't crash early.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I want him to hear.
Yeah.
So that when he goes home and he thinks about it, he's constantly got that context. Or, if he talks to his family, he's very close to his family. How was today? It was rough. And it's about me getting better. It's about a better tomorrow. It's about this plan for my future. So I know those conversations are going to come up because criticism, I don't want to think of it as criticism, but you got to get people on the right track. Because the longer they're on the wrong track, it's your fault if you don't tell them.
That's a really good point. Sometimes I think, have you found that you've done that with people? You've told them, hey, I'm mentoring you. You need to change this. No more passive-aggressive behavior. Do people change?
Some do, and some are shown the door.
Yeah. And so do people ever hide who they are from you? Like if you give them the heads up, I think sometimes what I'm worried about is like they showed me who they were, and then instead of listening to it, I pointed it out, and now they could hide it from me.
Well, yeah, inauthenticity is exhausting.
Right.
Effectively, they're undercover, they're lying. And then it's going to tire them out. They're not going to be able to keep up with it. I learned this in law enforcement. Early on, like when you join the FBI, there's a lot of sexy stuff you could do. You could be an undercover, you could be on a SWAT team, you could be on a hostage negotiation team. And I think at some point in time, everybody wants to try undercover because it looks cool in the movies, it sounds sexy as hell. And I remember, I got a shot to do some undercovers before I ever stumbled over negotiation. And first of all, I didn't like being inauthentic. I didn't like everything that I said, even if it was the bad guys. I don't like lying to anybody. Yeah. So I just wasn't comfortable with it. And then simultaneously, there was a guy that was first office with me in Pittsburgh that did some extensive undercover. And he'd come back and he's like, man, this is exhausting. He went undercover for a week one time. He was thoroughly exhausted. He says, it was horrible. I was exhausted the entire time. I couldn't keep track of the lies. So basically, inauthentic is exhausting, and they can't keep up with the lies. So if they're hiding from you who they are, when they get tired, you're going to see who they are. So they'll be able to keep it up early in the morning, fresh cup of coffee, rocking and rolling. By the afternoon, you're going to get the real person.
Oh, that's such a good point. Yeah, my dad always says, tell the truth, it's easier to remember.
A lot less work.
I think that's true. Yeah. I also remember, so we had a friend that worked in a 3-letter agency, not the FBI, but a different one, and with lots of undercover work. And
FDA, right? Food Drug Administration.
Exactly. That's what it was. Yes. And she said something to me that I thought was really fascinating. She said, you can't trust us because we've been institutionalized not to tell the truth.
Right.
And so it's real hard to break that. Have you found that's true from people who go undercover for a long time or have a duplicitous personality?
Yeah. Going undercover almost ruins everybody that does it. It's such a problem that every law enforcement agency that has undercovers sets up a lot of psychologists to try to fix these people. And it could be a problem for a number of reasons. Number one, lying to everybody about everything. If you're not built that way, is really hard. A lot of people in the agency that I think you're referring to, the ones that are really good at it, it's not unusual for them to quit and not retire. And I got a good friend of mine that said, yeah, in the FBI, almost all you guys last to retirement. But those of us that are really good at this, we can't take it anymore. And so most of the time, the really good ones will quit because it's soul sucking for them. Or if they adapt to it, another friend was thinking about going into that line of work, and a friend that was advising him said, there's no coming back. If you go there, there's no way back. And so it's very hard to do that. And if it consistently violates your moral compass, then it's just really difficult. So lying, while in the moment, seems fun, lighthearted, it's soul crushing over a long period of time.
I think that's right. I always liked Jordan Peterson's lie, which was tell the truth or at least don't lie. Which I think is true in some way. And I've found that, I remember when I was younger, I got into a period, I don't know if this happens a lot, where I did lie about silly things. Like I remember I said I was a different religion once, and I found myself sort of lying about stuff for a period when I was a younger girl in my teens. And it was hard to break.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to my mom, I kind of I keep lying about stuff that actually doesn't matter. So we had to have a talk about then it was religion. So God says don't lie, and this is why. Because you kind of become the reality that you create for yourself.
Right,
in some
right.
way, shape, or form. What about, I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about this, but, the FBI's got different perspectives publicly now.
Right.
And there's some lack of trust, I think, there with maybe the American people, or maybe it's just what I see in the news today. What do you think's happening there, and how could they fix their communication strategies where Americans would start trusting institutions like the FBI again?
Yeah, the real problem is people's misunderstanding of the difference between FBI headquarters and the rank and file in the field. And the guys that are drawn to headquarters are bureaucrats. And they're not trying to make great cases.
Interesting. Yeah.
The Bureau's really good at attracting people that can make great cases. And making a great case and being an effective bureaucrat are two different skills. So not long after I left the Bureau, a friend of mine wrote a book called The Threat Matrix. And he got an interview with Director Mueller while Mueller was still director of the Bureau. And Mueller was impressed with him and agreed to sit down. And what he did was he wrote a book about how 9/11 was solved. And I gave him a lot of advice of who to talk to. Talk to this guy. This is what I'm going to say to you. This is what his shortcomings are. I told him who he should interview with the director's permission. And then, you talk to this guy, and he's a treasure trove of information. But remember, he's more important than any case he ever worked. So keep that in light of what he tells you. So he mentions me in the book a couple times. Didn't need to. It's not part of the story. But 9/11 was solved by FBI New York. And Mueller had just taken over, and they wanted headquarters to be in charge, but FBI New York knew what was going on. So what they did, so the headquarters would be in charge, they transferred everybody in New York to headquarters. Wow. Now headquarters is in charge. So afterwards, he gets done with the book, and I'm reading it. I like the book. And I'd say to him, what's your opinion of FBI headquarters? And he says to me, I think the FBI has always succeeded in spite of FBI headquarters. And I said, all right, you understand the difference. So the rank and file bureau is still out there making cases. Now, how that's being perceived in Washington and how it's being navigated is complicated by people that are bureaucrats. And they're trying to navigate the shifting winds and the shifting accusations. And then one of the other interesting things the Bureau has always had to deal with and navigate is the Bureau works for the Department of Justice, and the Attorney General is a political appointee. Yeah. So every time there's a new presidential administration, there's a new Attorney General, and then there's a whole raft of political appointees at DOJ. And a friend of mine for a while was the highest level career DOJ employee in counterterrorism. So everybody above him was an appointee. And he understood counterterrorism inside and out. and the political administration was getting ready to change. I can't remember which one was coming in. I think actually in those days, I left just before Obama, and he said, you know, I want to stay in DOJ while the new presidential administration comes in, because he's going to be the guy that all the political appointees sit down with Mike, and Mike knows, and you got to learn from Mike. And afterwards, I talked to him, and I said, you know, what was it like? And he said, well, you know, when I first moved to Miami, I always wanted to stay in Miami while a hurricane came through town to see what it was like. And I never want to do that again. And surviving the change of political administrations in D.C. is like living through a hurricane, and I never want to do that again.
God, I believe.
So that's kind of the context that the Bureau's trying to navigate. They got FBI headquarters is mostly, not exclusively, they got a few great leaders there, but they're 80% career bureaucrats. And then they work ultimately for a political appointee. So they got to try to navigate that whipsaw. The man in the street, guys in the LA FBI, making cases. They don't care who's in Washington. Yeah. They really don't care. They want to make cases. I was in Kansas City FBI, New York FBI. Let's make cases. We'll let the bureaucrats make a lot of noise. We're not going to make headlines. We're going to do our job. You know, Trump gets shot at. Who's handling the follow-on investigation? As much as he complains about the FBI, he's not complaining about the way they're handling the follow-on. He'd have plenty of opportunity because he's dealing with rank-and-file guys who are running that out as opposed to the bureaucrats that are making excuses.
Yeah. Do you think, does the FBI like you being as public as you are?
They're mixed emotions about it. Yeah. You know, the guy just retired that was in charge of the New York office. It's mostly, he was a first office agent when I was a veteran agent, and was a great guy. And I get asked in occasionally to, you know, potentially offer some training on the hostage negotiation team. Yeah. And I've been going long enough that, you know, now most of them, they just like, he's this guy, he's got this book, and people ask me about it and ask me if I know him, and I don't know him.
I bet. I always, my husband knows Jocko, and I think it's sort of the same with the SEAL community. Like, you know, Jocko is a real, you know, SEAL that is battle tested and gone through it all. But, you know, I think with the FBI and the Navy SEALs, there's this, they don't really like people that are that public about all of it.
And I'm not sure how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And I heard Andrew Huberman tell a joke about Jocko one time. I don't know if you've heard it. You know, like when a child is born, the doctor says, you know, it's a boy, it's a girl. And when Jocko was born, the doctor said it's a man.
It's so true. He's a big boy. Yeah. Andrew Huberman doesn't have a lot of room to talk. He's also giant. And I remember the first time I saw him in the gym.
Oh yeah, he's
a big boy.
He's no midget, is he?
No, and that was before it was known that he had all those tattoos. So I remember like a bunch of people talking to this big guy, and I'm over there trying to get my 10-pound weight, you know, out of the way of whatever he's doing. And I look up and I'm like, oh yeah, that's Andrew Huberman. That's weird. I wouldn't have thought that. But really nice guy too.
Oh, he's a great guy. He's a friend. I'm ridiculously supportive of him in all ways. Yeah. I think he's a good human being. I listen to his neuroscience constantly.
Maybe last question before we get to one on cultural commentary, and then we wrap this bad boy up, because I have all these notes about things I need to do differently in my business now. That's a perfect example. So you've been around for a while, since the book came out. You know, you have...
A nice way of saying I'm old.
No way. With that DJ voice, you're going to be doing that when you're 90. You know, when you have friends in the public eye that go through really tough situations,
right.
Andrew obviously went through one. I think it'll happen to all of us.
Yep.
I don't know if you've ever had a public scandal. Have you?
Not yet. I'm figured it happens to everybody. It's coming
any day. Yeah. I think it's important to have a backbone, which is something you definitely have from being a negotiator. What is your take on how do you stand up in a world that seems hell-bent many times on making people stay in your lane, you know, only talk about what you want, you know, you're flawed here, so you can't be an expert anywhere else. How do you get a backbone?
Well, to some degree, I I'm prepping for it in advance. You know, I love the way The Rock handles his media. Like The Rock is, you see a lot of stuff where he's helping kids. He's driving through L.A. and there's a tour bus next, and he'll roll the window down and go like, "Hey guys, what's going on?" Like he's so generous. And I think he's aware that at some point in time, people are going to think you're putting yourself on a pedestal. We got to tear you down. So then he goes and he goes back to wrestling and starts hitting people with garbage cans. Or, you know, there's a picture of him swilling tequila. You know, I'm a tequila swilling. I play guitar and sing lousy songs. Yeah. You know, he's cautious about putting himself on too much of a pedestal because he never put himself there. But he knows that at some point in time, somebody's going to want to cheap shot you. Yeah. So, like when I did Andrew's, I was a guest on Andrew's podcast. On a previous podcast, somebody said, "Describe yourself in 3 words." And I said, "Deeply flawed human." And so then my buddy Joe Polish bought me a shirt that said "Flawed Human Being." I love Joe. He's one of the most generous people that I know. Just gave me the shirt. And so I'm like, all right, so you're going to try and tear me down in advance because you're going to accuse me of putting myself on a pedestal, which I never did. So let me preempt this a little bit. Yeah. And then secondarily, I think some of it is they're testing you. They want to see if they can get you to run. All right, will you back off? Again, whatever you think of Donald Trump, love him or hate him, nobody's in the middle. I think he gained so much admiration by refusing to back off of what he said. And every politician prior to him, they'd say something and they'd get criticized, and a politician would say, "Yeah, you know, I'm sorry I said that."
And you know they're not.
And they're not.
They're not.
And so, you know, they asked Trump, and he doubles down. And then it's an unending cycle like, well, not only did he say that, but can you believe he doubled down? Like, he does it every time. And then CNN acts shocked that he doubled down. Like, that's a dude who's eminently predictable. He's not going to apologize for anything he said. And we don't want people to apologize for being themselves because we want to know who they are. And so then when they come for me, I'm probably going to say, "Yeah, I said it." You know, if I had to say it again, might I change it? Possibly. But I'm going to own that I said that. Yeah. And, you know, I'm open to another interpretation. But, yeah, I said it and I did it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I think these days we need a lot more of that. Like the guy that I can't, and I'll get political here for a second, but like Gavin Newsom, we're in California right now. I'm like, how does this motherfucker shut down the state during COVID, tell you can't see your dying relatives in the hospital, and then show up to French Laundry, fanciest of restaurants, throw a party with a mask on, and then say, "Oh, I'm so sorry I did it." No, you're not. At least let me know you're like, "Hey, fuck you, I'm above you. I'm a politician. I'm more valuable. I consider myself above you." I might have more respect for the guy. So I think you're right. There is something today where I think we're just starting to turn the curtain a little bit, where people are like, "No, I actually respect the truth because I'm getting fed so much." Which leads me to my last question for you, which is, you said, as the lead former hostage negotiator in the FBI, previously, I will say with a certainty that the level of manipulation by the mainstream media should not be overlooked when we look back on what exactly led to this moment. An election is also a negotiation, and many of the people with the megaphones and pens have not been doing their jobs. What do you think about this? And what do you think we should do with this information?
Recognize them for what they are. And what they are, not all of them, but the ones we're talking about are professional instigators. Now, when I'm with the Bureau of Crisis Response on behalf of the U.S. government, so we end up in several G20 conferences. You know, it's a G8 on steroids. They got all these people there, and they put them in different places in the world. And I'm there with Secret Service, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and they're telling us about instigators, professional instigators. And then they show us how a crowd of peaceful demonstrators, numbering anywhere from 50 to 2,000 can be turned into a raging, violent mob by 6 instigators. Only 6 instigators to turn a peaceful crowd of 1,000 into a raging, violent mob. And then they'd say they put themselves, they know how to do this, they put themselves in strategic positions around the crowd so they don't look like they're together. And then they start to amplify the anger. And if you're in the crowd, you go like, oh, that guy said it. Oh, that guy said it. Oh, that guy said it. Now I'm angry. And the people with the megaphones are professional instigators. They want us at each other's throats. And I think if we're just aware that their intent is to instigate, whether they be with Fox News or whether they be with CNN, their intent is to instigate. If you're then at least warned that that's what they're trying to do, they're the kid in the schoolyard that walks up to you and says, you going to take that off him? Can you believe what he just said to you? If you know that knucklehead's going to do that, you look at him and go like, you know what? Shut up. And I think that's what all we really need. They're professional instigators, and they're the kid that's whispering in your ear in the schoolyard trying to instigate a fight.
Oh, that's so powerful. I never forget that instance of you put black ants and red ants into the jar together, and you just let them chill, and they hang out, and they're buddies, and nothing really happens. But you shake the jar, and the black ants attack the red ants, and the red ants attack the black ants. Yeah. And I picture that a lot with what's happening in the world today.
Yeah.
It's like, who's shaking this motherfucker?
Yeah.
And I think if we can stop, anytime I start to get mad because I see something on the internet that I think is dumb from a side that I don't agree with, I start remembering that it's actually not them. It's like whoever is making all of us all amped up. And the beautiful part, I think, about the work that you do is it's so useful for people to make more money, for people to have love in their lives, for people to have success in their relationships, and probably for our country today to make sure that we actually understand how communication can be manipulated and also how communication can be made whole.
Right.
So I think it's beautiful. Thank you so much for being here today. Where else can people get information on the documentary today, Tactical Empathy? Just go to Amazon and check it out.
It's on Amazon. We're posting regularly on it on my Instagram, at the FBI Negotiator.
Yeah, it's a good Instagram.
We put up, and a mutual friend of ours, Nicole Benham, works with me very hard on Instagram, and we try to put a lot of content out, and then we put stuff out on like how can you find out more, how can you get more. We're talking about it on the Instagram as well.
Yeah, I think you got to go do the quiz too. I'm going to do it after this. I'm going to make my husband do it. So that's at Black Swan LTD. We'll see what I am, and we'll see what he is. But I love the idea of figuring out what type of human are you, so you can figure out where your blind spots are. Thank you so much for being here, Chris.
My pleasure.
Finding love is hard. There is nothing easy about finding the person you're going to share a room with for the rest of your life.
The most important deal you'll ever do is the partner you choose. Marriage done well is a superpower. That's why today I bring you Matthew Hussey, arguably the world's foremost dating coach.
There's an arrogance among a lot of entrepreneurs that they think if you're not on board and you don't support me, and it's like, no, being with an entrepreneur is a nightmare.
Do you have frameworks or tactics you use?
But I have these things I call emotional buttons. When we feel an emotion, and it's a good emotion, and we want to feel it again, it's really, really important to just...
If you're young and you're having a hard time finding somebody, does it help if you're like, maybe I should try dating across the aisle?
Ask yourself, what was missing last time around? That because that thing was missing, I was miserable. You have to have a strong enough reason to believe that the game is worth it.
For the last 20 years, he's advised everyone from regular folks to royalty, literally. And his clients include people like Eva Longoria and Tyra Banks. He's written bestsellers, gone viral on every platform you can name, and also built one of the most loyal female audiences on the internet, helping people find maybe the most important thing in the world, love, and keeping it. So without further ado, let's bring on Matthew Hussey to talk about how do we find love, how do we keep it, how do we date, and how do we not just get married but stay married happily. So for my single friends, I keep hearing that it's harder than ever out there, that they can't find someone, even if they were married before, they're divorced, they're trying to figure it out. You've been doing this for 18 years, talking to people about dating and psychology and marriage and partnership. Is it harder now today than any other time? And what's different now?
I think in some ways it is harder now. I think there's more and more news stories now about what's happening for men and women. Yeah. Not that I want to plunge headfirst into those political debates, but it's become, I think, hard to ignore that there is something going on that is making life difficult at all different age groups. Yeah. You have people who are out there who are really looking for commitment. You have women looking for commitment, and we're living in a world where, I don't know the stats off by heart, but women are making more money, men are struggling, a lot of men, not all men, but a lot of men. Women are more educated, a lot less men by comparison are graduating. So there seems to be something going on there in terms of, women whose standards have gone up, men who are struggling to keep pace. Yep. How does that then show up in dating in terms of, are women happy with who they're meeting? Are men happy with who they're meeting, or the ways that they're feeling necessary, or in any way, are they struggling with where they are? Are they struggling with their confidence? I think there's just an awful lot going on in terms of men feeling sidelined and men not feeling like they match up to some ideal. That's going on the women's side too. Women feel like they're not matching up to an ideal. I think social media has created an ideal that's so hard for any of us to live up to. It's created a completely fake image of what success is, of what a good-looking person is. Like, you can't even trust what Santorini looks like anymore.
That's so true.
You know what I mean? How could you not be disappointed these days going to Santorini? It's been perfected on Instagram. So, what has happened to holiday destinations has happened to our faces, has happened to people, has happened to lifestyles. So there's a kind of impossible standard that I think a lot of people are looking for. And like I said, we can get into it, but I think it affects people differently depending on the age they are. Interesting. Whether they're in their 20s, and you're now finding, I saw a news piece the other day that Gen Z women are having an easier time, some of them dating millennial men, because some of their political beliefs are more aligned than they are with men their own age, because we're living in this really strange time where, it used to be the case that young people were the most liberal, and now, especially among men, they trend more conservative. So you've now got a lot of very liberal women finding a lot of men their age have very different views than them on life, and they're finding that older men have more things in common in terms of their views than men their own age. Again, these are generalizations, but there's something really fascinating about that. Then you've got people coming out of marriages in their 50s saying, especially if they're a woman, I'm dating guys who are expecting, very old ways of being, and I have to show up, very grateful and very submissive to a relationship and having no needs. Meanwhile, they're not offering an awful lot. Many of them don't want to commit again. They don't want to get married again. They don't want to be back in a situation where they're being told what to do or where they're having to answer to anybody. So there's just so many mismatches across the board right now. And there is a bit of a sense of it's a bit of a mess.
Yeah, it does feel like that. It's interesting because you coach, through your business, which we'll talk about, Matthew AI, and then also all the events and everything that you do. You coach and talk to thousands and thousands of people about dating, and millions of people across social media. Do you find, are people happier when they date somebody or marry somebody that has the same political view as them, or no?
I think it removes a variable. I think it takes something off the table that becomes a deep source of antagonism in a relationship. I mean, it's not I deal with people who are, you've got one person in the relationship who has one stance on abortion and the other side has a completely different stance. That's really tricky because we're not talking two people in a relationship who are like, one of them thinks we should pay a bit more in tax and the other one doesn't,
Right.
which kind of, those situations are a little easier because it's just like, you believe in higher taxes and I don't. When it comes to those more deep-seated issues, it's very hard for people. And also, we live in a world I'd be the last person to make the point that we're so divided. And so it's much more now, I think, people have said, if you hear one person's belief now, you kind of tend to know everything they believe.
Yep.
Because of whatever echo chamber they're in. And so I think you have two people meeting where it's not just like there are nuances in, they have different, like they agree for the most part over here, but then there's just some areas where they just don't quite align. Usually it's like, no, you believe all of these different things and I believe all of these different things. And that's a hard relationship to have unless you've got two extremely compassionate, curious, and empathetic people who are trying to understand each other, but that doesn't exactly portray the landscape right now, does it?
No, it almost feels like people want to lead first with ideology. It's like, I am my ideology, as opposed to I want to be with another human.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I don't think I really cared or anybody knew so much what political aisle somebody else was on. It wasn't a topic of conversation we talked about consistently. And I wouldn't have said, I would never date Matthew because he's X and I'm Y. I'd be like, he seems super interesting. Oh, he has that political view? Whatever. Kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If you're young and you're having a hard time finding somebody, do you think, does it help if you're like, man, maybe I should try dating across the aisle? Or are you like, no, it's actually a bad idea because now you just have all this friction later because we're so closely tied to our ideologies?
I think that we should try and be on the lookout for the values that seem to transcend what people think.
Yeah.
I think it was Christopher Hitchens once said, it's more important how someone thinks than what they think.
I love Hitchens.
Yeah.
Letters to a Young Contrarian.
I'm sad.
Such a classic.
It's a great, great, great book. And I'm sad that we don't get to hear his opinions on everything today.
Yeah, me too. Could
It
you
always feels like one of the
imagine?
great losses of our lives now, that we don't get to hear him weigh in on things.
Yeah.
He's a voice I miss tremendously.
He'd be a good person for young people to listen to too, because he was like a socialist and a communist and then a capitalist and then an atheist.
Who
and
would
then
he have been
believed
in
God
20 years if he'd lived another 20
well,
years?
he would have gone all backwards again.
Yeah,
Probably
I don't
right.
know. It'd be fascinating to hear. And so, but I always admired that idea of, how you think, not what you think. And, me and my wife, Audrey, did not start with all the same beliefs about everything.
You didn't lay your voting card on the table. You met her.
No.
Say, can you walk me through each decision, please?
But it was, what was clear early on was that we did have some different stances on things. And the more we were in each other's worlds, I think we've really affected each other. Both of us have changed. And that to me there's something very, very beautiful about that. So if I had written her off because she believes different things than me and she'd written me off for the same reason, we might have been missing something more important, which is that actually at our core, Audrey and I are both intensely curious people. And I'm more interested in truth than I am in being right. So that, which by the way, is always, this is a very besides the point to make, but I always think it's an important point for people to hear, is that saves you actually from fear of embarrassment. And, in an interview like this, right, or a conversation like this, it would be very scary to go in thinking that the goal is to be right.
Yeah.
Because then if I misstep and say something that I turn out to be wrong about, it's a really hard thing for my ego to try and reverse out of that. But if I instead say, I just care about finding what's true, then I can change my position on anything at any time. And there's something very powerful about that. And I think that if you can bring that to a relationship, then you have a relationship between two people where they're both constantly evolving. So there's a certain magic to that you are prepared to change your mind about things, and I'm prepared to change my mind about things. And because we know that about each other, we're not keeping a scorecard of who's right and who's wrong. Instead, and there's something very disarming when you see someone else that you're with in a relationship say, "You've made me think differently about that." Because it lowers your guard. When you hear someone say that, you then think, why am I being so stiff about my opinions? If they're willing to do that, maybe there's some areas that I need to concede on or I need to think about. And Audrey was always so good at that. She would one of the loveliest compliments she would give me, and in turn I've given her, is, because of you, I've changed my mind on that. Or because of you, I actually think a little differently about that. And I really credit you with helping me understand more about that, or seeing that a different way. It's such a gorgeous compliment to receive from someone. And I know that getting that compliment from her has it's actually disarmed me in a lot of ways. And seeing that she has the humility to shift ideas has bred more of that humility in me in a relationship where I can think of times in the past where I've been very defensive and digging my heels in on a position and very competitive about who's winning the argument. And, we just don't have that in our relationship, which is lovely. And that's why I say that's deeper than what we thought was like this layer. How we thought was a much deeper layer. And because of how we thought, that we had an intense curiosity and a humility and a desire to know what's truthful, and that superseded what we thought.
It's so true. Yeah, it kind of goes back to that like Carol Dweck fixed versus growth mindset that she talks about. And I always thought, I've done a marriage wrong once before. And so I was married before. And I think the biggest problem was one of us, I think, was more growth mindset. So like, hey, I could be wrong now, but that doesn't mean I am wrong as a human. I'm just wrong in this moment. And like, we're going to keep figuring that out. And if you're fixed, you're kind of like, I am either smart or I am not, or I am wrong or I am right. And that is very actually fragile, as opposed to like, Taleb's anti-fragile, which would be like, yeah, I can bend. I'm the grass or the palm tree. I'm not the oak that can break.
It's very freeing.
Yeah, it's
very freeing.
Now today, obviously, I want to obsess on the idea of how do we help more humans find love? For me in particular, if I would have said that comment 3 years ago, I probably would have, like, that's like so touchy-feely for me. I'm a finance person. Like, I'm like, what is wrong with her? Like, did she do some ayahuasca before this? But I think now that I've been, married for many years, and I've watched my parents have an incredible marriage. One, I think it's such a superpower. Like, a marriage well done is so beautiful, and it's my happiest thing in my life. Like, he's incredible. And don't get me wrong, we fight all the time too and have all the issues. So I want to help people as much as we can with your expertise find love. And then I also want us, maybe even more important, it's not just about getting married, it's about staying married, right? Happily. And so stay married. And so I kind of, one of the questions I had was, one, how do you stay married? What are the traits of two people who stay married together happily?
I like talking about this because I feel I'm discovering this as I'm talking, because I've talked so much about dating. I've talked so much about getting into relationships. It's fun for me to think about this side of it because I've been asked about it less. Look, I think that you have to actually be I think a great marriage actually requires an awful lot of discipline. It's not a word that comes up a lot in relation to relationships, but I actually think discipline is really, really important, because if you have a good body, there's because there's a discipline there about the way that you show up in that area of your life. And it's not easy. There are days you don't feel like going to the gym. I don't feel like going to the gym. I would say 4 out of 5 days
Same.
that I go. I really don't. It's one of those things that I feel I'm happy I did it after I did it. Beforehand, not so much. And every area of our life is like that. Our business is like that.
Dating partnerships aren't the only ones that are really important. So are partnerships in business. If you guys right now are looking to build your business and you're confused on your next partner, on the next move in your business, I want you to know we got your back. We actually just started something only for owners of businesses who are looking to grow. It is, I think, for you. If you are a 6, 7, or 8-figure entrepreneur that feels like right now today, you don't exactly have the recipe for your growth accelerator. If that is you, we got your back. Go ahead and click the link. You can talk to our team and figure out if you should also build alongside some other humans who could be your future partners.
You know that's so well. It has to be this thing that you go to work every day and you show up for it, and it's not always easy. You know, David Whyte describes, the British poet David Whyte describes our vocation as one of the 3 marriages that we are in. And like any marriage, you have days where you don't like it and you have to do things you don't want to do and you make sacrifices. And I think it's one of the things that makes people feel quite resentful of following their dreams is how disappointing following their dreams can be.
That hits too close.
But you know, like you do this thing, you see a person, I don't know, on stage and you go, I want to do that. But you're talking about 1/10 of the job when you see that person on stage. If someone comes and sees me at my retreat and says, I want to do that, they're seeing me in one weekend of my entire year. Most of my year is me sat in our house behind a laptop on Zoom calls or sitting in a quiet room making content. That people don't look at that and go, I want that life.
No.
They see you on stage, I want that. And that's such a small part of it. So then someone does it and they go, oh my God, I think I'm doing it wrong because I don't feel naturally happy all the time, or I don't feel naturally excited all of the time. So there are days where you don't want to do it. And I think there's true of relationships as well. It's challenging some days. You don't have the energy for it. You don't feel like listening to someone today when they're talking about something they're going through. And you're like, oh my God, I've 100 other things to do today. I really didn't need on top of that for you to be having an anxious moment about something. And you feel like you don't know. But how often is it like that at work? You have 100 things to do at work, and then someone comes to you and says, I need you to deal with this. And it is a swell of resentment that like, how dare you bring me one more thing in a day where I'm already so overloaded? But it's like, that's what you signed up for. That's the game.
That's the game.
And so when you realize that's the game, you have 2 choices. Either decide the game is worth it, or you bail, or you stop trying, which is the slow death from that point on. But you have to have a strong enough reason to believe that the game is worth it. And I have been, long before I was ever good at committing in my love life, I always thought I had a big problem with commitment.
Interesting.
And what I didn't quite realize was that I had already been married I'd been in a marriage for a good 10 years of my life that I had been faithful to in this organization I'd created and the work that I do. So it turns out I was quite good at committing when I had a big enough reason. Mm-hmm. And I think that in relationships, that one of the greatest things we can have is really start with a big enough reason to want to listen to that person have a problem today, to want to wake up and see if you can anticipate a little bit what might make their day better, what might make the relationship a bit stronger. That to me is everything. And I think I am more connected today to why this relationship is important than I've ever been in my entire life.
What is the reason why it's important to you?
It makes my whole life better. Everything good in my life is made better by my relationship with my wife. And everything bad in my life is made easier by my relationship with my wife. She is the amplifier for all good things and a balm for all bad things. And so she's like this core asset in my life, this core thing that has this wonderful effect on everything else. And so for me, it's just so, if I'm resentful or if I'm feeling annoyed or I've lost sight of the bigger picture, which is like, dummy, your life is so, like, you have forgotten how much better your life is because this person is in it.
What do you do in those moments? Like when you have a moment, you're in your relationship, you get resentful and you start pushing one way or the other. How do you realign and remember why you were there in the first place? Do you have frameworks or tactics you use?
I do. I have this is where we could really end up geeking out, but I have these things I call emotional buttons. And they are, this is a big module on my retreat, but it only became a module on my retreat because I had been using it in my life for so long that I felt like I can't not talk about it. But when we feel an emotion and it's a good emotion and we want to feel it again, it's really, really important to just like hit pause and go, what's happening right now? Is there a kind of set of ingredients right now that has led to me feeling this way? And it can be, it can be something really simple. I mean, there's a in that movie, The Fighter with Mark Wahlberg, and I forget the other guy's name, but it's about two brothers, really. It's about this relationship between two brothers. And there's this moment where Mark Wahlberg is about to get in the ring for this big fight. And his older brother is stood there with him. And he puts his forehead against Mark Wahlberg's head. And he's just talking to him. But I get goosebumps as I'm saying it because he's talking to him, but he's being like, he's making him feel safe in a moment where there's so much going on and there's so much noise and there's so many nerves, and his older brother is really there for him in that moment. And it became this instant kind of emotional button for me for why I wanted to be a good brother. It's almost like bypassed logic, right? It's just, I saw a thing and it instantly, I was like, I want to be a better brother. I've got two younger brothers. I'm one of three. Like that, that is an image of the way I want to be a brother to my younger brothers. And the thing I love about emotional buttons is that they bypass, I don't have to write an essay to myself on my why for wanting to be a good brother. An emotional button just bypasses that. All I need to do is call back that image, that moment. And sometimes it's the music from that moment, if you want to use music. Sometimes it's the picture of that moment. Sometimes it's the literal YouTube clip of that moment. But I can literally go back there. Now, a lot of us do this unconsciously anyway, right? We have songs we listen to put us in a certain state, and we have videos we like to watch that pump us up. And so, but what I'm suggesting is much more granular than that. It would be too simplistic to describe it as motivation. I have emotional buttons for so many different, very nuanced things in my life. I have emotional buttons for being a great brother. I have emotional buttons for socializing, because guess what? I'm an introvert who has socializing for me takes a lot of energy, but I have emotional buttons that I've written down that make me want to socialize when I reconnect with them. So to your point, to circle back, I have lots of emotional buttons for wanting to be an amazing partner and for how wonderful my relationship is and how lucky I am and the kind of husband I want to be to my wife. I have emotional buttons, and they're not things I've conjured out of thin air. That's the beautiful thing about emotional buttons. You're actually working with things, tapping into nerves you've already touched before.
Brilliant.
Just by paying attention and recording the formula. Winston Churchill said, men occasionally stumble over the truth, but most pick themselves up and carry on as if nothing happened. And I would say anytime we stumble over a moment of peace, a moment of love for our spouse, like an uncommon moment of love for your spouse, where you just, sometimes Audrey has a laugh. I've never told her this actually, but there is a certain kind of like guttural laugh. She has almost like a dirty laugh that she has when you really make her laugh.
Uh-huh.
I'm not funny enough to make her laugh like that every week, but like when I do, it's the greatest thing on earth. Like I live for that laugh.
Wow.
And something about that laugh, hard to even put into words, but there's something about that laugh that makes me love her so much. So me just remembering that under my emotional buttons for my relationship with Audrey would be that deep, like guttural, dirty laugh she does when she's really finds something funny. I think of that. I feel love for Audrey now as I'm saying it.
Yeah. I feel love for Audrey as you're saying it. I'm like, this is contagious. I'm like, I want to hear that laugh.
But that's, well, by the way, I mean, then we get into a whole other territory there, because that's, that's why our favorite teachers at school were our favorite teachers, is because they were able to actually pass emotional buttons on to us. They loved something so much that there was a way of talking about it, a way of describing it, that they may have even been able to infect us with their emotional button. So if you were to open up my laptop, there's a file called Emotional Buttons, and it's broken down by all of the different things that I want to feel, because like Winston Churchill said, I never stumble over an emotion or a moment without just stopping and going, why do I feel so good right now? What is this? What's happening? What's the little formula that's going on here that I need to pay attention to, so that I don't have to wait until I stumble back over this by accident.
That's so good. It's almost like muscle memory when you're working out, how, you're supposed to pay attention. Like right now, I really am trying to flex my left glute because I want to activate it. And when I feel that, like you can feel it. But if you haven't actually paid attention to it before, it's hard to separate one muscle from another one. You could just be this cacophony of muscle movements, think you're working out, and actually not target at all the right areas.
That's exactly right. Because the button you would use to feel energized and like, let's go, is a different thing than maybe just contentment.
Right.
Or peace.
And you might not know why. And so then you become this series of accidents, like you talk about, where you don't know why your emotions are so all over the place. You don't know why you're feeling this way today or not, as opposed to like, I do recognize that I feel anxious in this moment, which happens just about every time I have 2.5 cups of coffee. and I don't get a good night's sleep because I sleep better with my spouse. That is such a powerful unlock. I'm going to start doing that.
I literally, there's almost no tool that I use more in my life than I have a little day planner that I put my to-dos in and whatnot. And if you could open it up now, you would see that every day the first thing, and I'm not someone who's like 1,000 morning routines and all of that, but like there is this one thing that I tried to do. I don't always get it done, but I tried to spend just 5 minutes in the morning, open up my emotional buttons file and just pick a selection to engage with, because it's like having a kind of treasure trove of all of these things that tap into beautiful states that bypass logic and just make me feel like I feel very, very abundant when I look at them.
And you know what else I like about it? It's really simple. Like if I think about my husband, he notices them more. He has much better self-awareness and body awareness than I do. And so when he gives me a hug and he does this like deep breath kind of hug thing that if anybody else did it to me, it would totally freak me out. But when he does it, it's like, I just feel down regulation. I immediately am like, that just got rid of all this stress I didn't realize I had. And it was just this big hug that I got from him. And if you asked me that question, what do I think would lead to a happy marriage, or what's my deep why, I would have gone cerebral. I would have said, because this is your partner through life and they're there for difficult times, and remember that. But it's way more powerful actually to feel it.
And you're right, by the way. You're absolutely right. That's a perfect answer. What I like about what you're describing is, is the why, right? Like if you had a table, it would be like on this side is your actions and on this side is your why for taking that action. Why am I going to take an action in my relationship today? Actions take effort, actions take energy. Why, how can I get myself to do this thing? And of course, as much has been written on starting with why.
Yeah.
And, you know, a friend of mine, Simon Sinek, has like led that charge. But what I'm intensely interested in is the bridge between action and why.
Yeah.
How can we get to the why quicker? What's like the main line where you can just push a button and that button is an instant trigger for your why without you having to go through the process of every time you need to connect with your why, sitting there and going, I'm going to journal about what my why is in this area. What's like the instant like connector switch? And for me, that the middle column between those two is emotional buttons.
That's so good. Now, let's say that somebody's listening and they're like, all right, I'm not with somebody yet. Or a lot of people, I think, are with somebody and they're super unhappy. Like I know a lot of married people these days who say, I get it a lot from men, actually. Man, I wish my wife worked as much, you know, as you did. I wish she understood the business. You know, she's not as supportive with working all the time. So I guess my question is it better to have no spouse than an unsupportive spouse?
Yes. But it depends what we mean by unsupportive. Like to what extent, how do we define unsupportive? Because there's so much to say on this. Firstly, if we start from a place of there are many different ways to live a good life, and charging forward with a business that energizes and excites you is one potential route to a good life. So is being a teacher. So is having a hobby that you love, that you lose yourself in. So is being someone who's just very into creating peace in their life and doesn't need to be racing around all the time in order to be happy.
Sounds nice.
You know, I'm one of the things I'm not to be too self-referential. I want to be careful, but I am the kind of type A, like I've always been that hyper ambitious, charge after it. One of the things I've been most grateful for is having someone who also brought a different energy to the table. And I think that sometimes we live so much in our little like narrow lane of how we live our lives that we don't realize actually there might be some real merit to the way that someone else prioritizes differently than we do. And that might be just the kind of medicine that we need to help balance us out a little bit. So sometimes what people define as unsupportive, I think, is someone with values that says, for me, a good life isn't working day and night. That's not what a good life is to me. So then, and I would say there's nothing wrong with that. It might even be healthier. But the question is then, okay, so then how do these two worlds mesh? Mm-hmm. Is this person sort of this active impediment to certain goals that you have that are really important to you and takes no time to understand or see where you're coming from or what you're trying to do and why it's so important to you? And are you someone who can't stand the fact that they live life differently than you, even when they're not necessarily asking you to be anything else? You know, if they want to build out their days differently, that's their prerogative. I think that there's an arrogance among a lot of entrepreneurs and people who start things up that they think if you don't, like, if you're not on board, you don't get it and you don't support me. And it's like, no, you being with an entrepreneur is a nightmare.
Yeah,
it's a nightmare. True. It's like you like many of them are workaholics. They never stop. They're always talking shop. They can't get their brain off the business. They're in anxious states a lot of the time because it's like a lot of the time it's make or break, and you feel this immense pressure and stress. And also, let's be real. There is something wildly selfish about being an entrepreneur. Like that.
And irrational.
It's like people, I'm doing this for, no, you're doing this for you. Most people are doing it because they want, it's your dream.
Yep.
It's a bit like someone, we think when it's building a business that somehow people get a bit more righteous about it. But if someone moved to, if someone's partner said, I'm going to go and act in Los Angeles, but I'm doing this for us, you'd be like, no, I support you and I love you. And if this is going to make you happy, then let's figure it out. But don't tell me that you're moving to Hollywood and making less money and doing all of these auditions for us. This is your dream. And I think we have to be very careful when we have a thing that we want to do, when it's important to us or our sense of significance or our sense of purpose or our ego, that we do this. And then we want to be mad at someone else because they don't get it and they're not like on board with us. A team is one where I recognize your goals and you recognize mine, and we both really, really care about each other's goals. And we really look at all those goals and we say, look, I get this is really, really important to you. How do we make this work? Like, what can we do? And you do the same for me. It's not one-sided. We do it for each other. That's a healthy relationship. But I get a little like frustrated with all of the